Okay, I think this is recording. Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, so let me first of all thank Alfonso Esquada for inspiring me to do this, okay? To try to reach more of a live audience through a YouTube channel. The name I have chosen for myself, first I was going to say UFO Bob, but there's somebody else that already has that name. So I decided to extend that name instead of UFO Bob, call it Unified Field Origin Bob. Now, why Unified Field Origin? The the unified field, everybody knows about this, was something that Albert Einstein was working on before his death. Okay, he wanted to find a common denominator to the various laws which are behind operating the universe. Okay, the atomic strong force, weak force, and there's other forces which are at work. He wasn't able to find it, but he was in search for it. Anybody who studies Einstein's life knows that the thing that Albert Einstein, stumbled over was in the field of quantum physics. And the reason why is because of the unpredictability when it comes to quantum physics. Einstein liked Einstein liked for things to be very, very, very explainable and predictable, where you could break it down. You could finally have an equation to solve whatever you needed to solve. He had an argument before with Niels Bohr, who was a Danish physicist, and they went back and forth. And Albert Einstein said something to the effect that he didn't believe that God plays dice with the universe. And Niels Bohr shot back, and he says, "Will you quit telling God what to do?" In other words, if God wants to play dice with the universe, and God is free to play dice with the universe. I think what happened to Albert Einstein is that when he got older, and it happens to to a lot of people, but I think as he got older, he became more constricted in his thinking. Now, just for the record, I'm a huge admirer of Albert Einstein. He made such huge leaps in terms of the field of physics. It wasn't even funny. But the major breakthroughs came when he was primarily young, and it seems like nature favors, for the most part, when it comes to creativity, not everybody, but for the most part, nature favors the young. Because if you notice, as the young come out with a lot of new ideas, whether in the music or arts or whatever it is, or in the field of science or other things, it's because the mind is still at the age where it's very, very creative. It's not that we lose our creativity when we get older, it's just that the neural pathways start getting set up within, from our brain to our nervous system. And when those pathways start getting set up, as you go through those particular grooves more and more and more and more, your thinking becomes much more attached to the way you're thinking. I don't know if that makes any sense. In other words, thinking itself is like an exercise, but the more you do it, the more those particular movements from the way your mind operates, the nervous system operates throughout your body and everything else, it becomes set. Okay, so it's hard to break out. It's hard to break from old patterns. So Albert Einstein had a hard time with quantum physics, and it was a stumbling block for him because he liked for things to be very predictable. My thing about it, and my own perception, because we're talking about the unification of all forces. What do we mean by the unification of all various forces? Okay, and is it even possible to to unite all the various forces into one common, as far as denominator? Okay, to do that, you would have to have a law that bridges you would have to have a law that bridges the quantum world to the macro world. In other words, so the subatomic micro world to the macro world. You would have to have a law that would bridge those two. What is the law? Can we even define what that law would be? See? How would that particular law operate? from a religious point of view, some people who are religious will say, well, God is the one that unites the forces. And I understand. I mean, people who are, religiously inclined, and I'm religiously inclined, why they would come out with that, okay? But see, we have to be careful when it comes to putting in our religious input when it comes to the field of science, because oftentimes a person could could without knowing it could slant what true objective science is because of religion. Okay, it's the same thing with politics. A person could slant true objective science because of one's politics. We hear a lot of talks, for instance, about global warming and climate change. Now, my particular intake about that is that, first of all, biological evolution has been going on for millions of years. And that means our planetary system has gone through various changes for millions of years, okay? And so our planet has sustained wide various weather changes and everything. So what's happening right now, for instance, with the whatever planetary changes that are happening, are we to discount whatever we're putting into the atmosphere in terms of, let's say, contributing to whatever various weather changes? Of course not. You don't discount anything like that, you have to take everything into account. But see, in order to have a true objective study, a person would have to be free, completely free of any political bias and any religious bias, okay? For instance, give you an example. And I'm going to get back to the unified field thing that Albert Einstein was talking about, and why I've chosen my name, the unified field origin, and what does that pertain to, okay? For people who are watching this on YouTube, okay? In terms of the weather thing, on all the various weather patterns and all the various things that have been going on, okay? How much is it due to whatever carbon uses or coal uses or whatever chemical uses, this use, that use? Okay, how much is the various weather changes, the various factors where it becomes altered because of these things, okay? I don't have the statistics for it. I've heard arguments from both sides and everything. And of course, we as a species, we should be careful. When I say we as a species, as human beings, we should be careful of how we use our resources, but at the same time, we have to be honest and objective from the field of science, what's actually going on in terms of all the various things. And this is from both sides. It's not just from one side. I've heard arguments from both sides, okay, about it. So what am I saying here? Because we're talking about something that's a hot button issue, but it's a hot button issue because, in my point of view, the politics that goes into it. Let's say, suppose, I'll give you an example. Let's say, suppose a person instead, let's say, having a political point of view about it. Let's say they were to have a religious point of view about it. Let's say you did have, let's say, a group of religious people, and they did believe in global warming. But they were to come out and say, well, the reason why we have global warming is because of sins of mankind. I mean, how would that be received? You see what I'm saying? In other words, you're getting a person that's coming out, and they're coming out with a religious statement saying that global warming is caused by the sins of mankind. It's because of the moral wrongs that the human race is doing. Is a morality thing that's causing it. In other words, it's not the science so much as the science, but as it is, it's a punishment that God is sending to the human race. Well, once again, here we go. We're getting a religious bias going into a field that we shouldn't be applying toward, okay? So we got to be very careful when it comes to studying the field of science, okay? We have to use what's called pure instrumentation. Pure instrumentation means that when you study something, you study it from a purely objective point of view. And when you're producing what's called a thesis of something, okay, you're coming out with a theory about something, you got to gather all the data, all the statistics, you got to do all the various experiments, what are the experiments pertaining to. You got to write it down, you got to show through through all the body of evidence, through pure science, what's been happening, okay? How it's been happening, what's been producing it, or what is the various experiment, what is it being conducted on, how is it being conducted, you know? In other words, you got to have everything written down, and it just can't be a few experiments. It has to be a whole body of experimentation. So that's reason why science is pure science, pure objective science is so beautiful. It's like pure objective mathematical study, okay? Any of the sciences, when you start studying from a pure objective point of view without putting any sort of bias in any way, shape, or form, but just to study science as it is, okay? It's a beautiful thing. It's like in the field of mathematics, okay? Mathematics, how it all interlocks, okay? All the mathematical equations, how they all interlock. It doesn't matter what a person's particular politics or religion is, mathematics in itself is always self-consistent. You know, you have apparent paradoxes and other things that go outside the ranges of normal mathematics, okay? For instance, you know, you could have something like this. For instance, I'm sure people have heard about it. Suppose you get an arrow, you're shooting an arrow 100 yards away. You release the arrow, okay? Before it go travel to 100 yards, it has to go 50. Before it go to 50, it has to do 25. Before 25, 12 and a half. And then you keep going on and on and on and on and on and on. Because the numbers go into the level of infinity itself, you're never going to find an ending of constantly cutting in half the pathway of that arrow mathematically, okay? So from a mathematical point of view, symbolically speaking, you can say in one sense, well, what the mathematics is saying, since you always got to cut it down half, always has to meet it, since numbers never end, and the arrow never really gets to the target, okay? But see, we're dealing with what's called symbology and everything, and so once again, we have to be careful in terms of the way we interpret things. But at the same time, we use mathematics as a measuring instrument for many things, okay? It's the same thing with the concept of time, okay? People take time as a literal thing, but time is a mental construct, okay? From a higher dimensional perspective, there's really no such thing as time, because time is just a mental construct. It's a measuring yard that we use. Time is a fourth dimensional measuring yard. That's what time is, okay? It's a fourth dimensional measuring yard. A three-dimensional measuring yard would be like getting, let's say, a tape in which you're taping, let's say, how long it is, let's say, from the kitchen to the living room, okay? The amount of feet, okay? We'll extend that one more dimension, okay? Then you got a measuring apparatus for what's called time. Time is like the extended measuring thing, but now it's done fourth dimensionally, okay? The curvature is just added just a more to a higher dimensional level. So it's that type of thing, okay? But back to what I was talking about, because we're talking about the field of science and everything else, not to put any sort of bias in there. And we're talking about Albert Einstein, how he was having a problem because he was stumbling over something. The thing he was stumbling over before he died was, in fact, quantum physics. That really bothered him. And a lot of people, even today, know that it's very difficult to unite the quantum world to the macro world. How to unite the two? You know, what's the common thing that would unite it? Okay, what is the particular law? Okay, for me, I would say symbolically speaking, what unites the two is the principle of scientific infinity. Okay. So I'll say it again, okay? What unites the two worlds are scientific infinity, okay? Scientific infinity meaning, and I'm going to say it one more time, okay? What unites the two, symbolically speaking, is scientific infinity through the observer effect, okay? Because it's the observation that causes, apparently, the collapse of the wave function, okay? But does the wave function really collapse? But either way, whether the wave function actually collapsed or not, okay, so you got the Copenhagen interpretation, you got the Everett interpretation. Does the wave function really collapses, okay? Either way, the observation determines what the reality is going to be. So basically, pretty much, you got a unification of the forces happening, the unification of the forces of both the micro, and which, let's say, before you observe the electron, is just in a statistical frame of reference in a wave function. Once you observe it, is in a particle formation. So you have, in fact, united it with the macro world, in which that particular electron to particle force, the way it's been traveling, has been traveling since the Big Bang. Okay, 14 billion years ago, according to what's been taught. Okay, so it's the quantum, is what I call the infinite scientific observer effect, which is the unification power, force, scientific law behind it all. Is what we do when we observe. So it's that particular aspect that unites the forces. That's the key to it. What else? How else can you explain it? It's kind of like, for instance, this is symbolic. Okay, the difference between Western and Eastern medicine. Okay, Eastern medicine deals more with the internal. Western medicine more with the external. Okay, so it's that type of thing. Pretty much what unites it, it's the once again, is the way it's observed, okay, but it's the scientific infinity force, okay, that has always exists now, always will exist. And when you get to the higher dimensional level, it's not even what you would call having existed or will exist. It's just plain exist in one infinite stream. You could say one infinite stream of consciousness, if you want to put it that way, okay? But the science is always infinitely self-consistent, but it's infinitely self-consistent along the laws of infinite perfection. So the infinite perfection is constantly taking place all the time. In essence, you might also say perfection, infinite perfection is at work all the time. And it's only human free will which gives the illusion of imperfection. I don't know if that makes any sense. Human free will, which sometimes distorts things, okay, and sees things in a distorted manner, because it's not really taking that next jump and seeing how the universe really operates. The universe at the higher level operates from the level of constant infinite perfection at all times, okay? Scientific infinity through the observer effect. And the reason why I put the unified field origin, because that, what I say, the infinite scientific world, infinite science being infinitely perfect, will unite the various higher forces into what's called the origin of it all. The origin of all is the uniting of it all, of everything, okay? It's a super light wave function that even goes beyond light itself. So it's like during the time of the Big Bang, when the Big Bang happened, even though you had light speed, the universe itself was going outward even much faster than the speed of light, okay? So you get into what's called, what I call a centrifugal, in other words, you get into like a transcendence, okay, in which it keeps going on and on and on and on and on, okay. I wish I could say the name centrifugal, okay, force, okay, which is, okay, but it's a whole entire cosmic unification of it all. So that's pretty much my talk for tonight about it. And so the name I have adopted for myself, originally it was going to be called UFO Bob, but somebody else already has that name, so my name will be called Unified Field Origin Bob, okay? Hold on for a second. Today is the 21st, so December 21st, 2019, Bob Larson, and so my YouTube name is called Unified Field Origin Bob, okay? So that's my name. And my various talks be on a whole range of different things, okay? Because now this channel is trying to reach out to more of a wider audience. And I'm going to try to bring more people in because I'm really concerned about the way things are happening on all various levels on this planet. My job is to try to help people to take what I call a spiritual quantum jump upward and onward to a higher level to help to unite this planet. When I say unite this planet, not through politics, as politics doesn't unite. Politics divides, okay? So forget about trying to do it for politics, okay? Politics ain't going to work. It'll never work because everybody has various ideas of how our political system should be, okay? You could have two of the nicest people. Let's say they're in a bar, okay? They're rooting for their various team. All of a sudden, they're buddy. All of a sudden, they start talking about politics, and one person finds out the other person has different politics. Before you know, they're hating each other's guts. So politics ain't going to do it. Same thing with religion. Same thing. Two nice people all of a sudden gets in a discussion about religion, or one's church, or one's synagogue, or one's mosque, or it could get into any talk. It could talk about Eastern philosophy or whatever it is. But basically, for the most part, also there's religious differences. Just before you know, they're really people are really starting to battle along those lines. You see how that happens? So those things really divide people. Okay. So what do? Well, the only thing you got to do is that you got to go outside those boxes. And the way you got to deal with the religion and the politics is that it has to start coming from a format of to disagree without being disagreeable. Okay, there's too much now where it's both disagreeing and being disagreeable at the same time, and it's happening from both sides. Okay, and everybody's getting caught up, and it's not good. When I say everybody, a lot of people, I've gotten caught up, and it's not good because it just adds more towards what I call the negative wave around this whole entire globe, okay? I love the United States, you know, I want to retain our sovereignty. I don't want to see absorbed into any new world order format or anything, okay? So that's my outlook about the United States, but at the same time, from the field of science, you know, we're all, from a field of science, stepping back from it all, from the field of science, just pure science, we're all one united globe, okay? What affects one part of the world affects the other, okay? So in that way, from the field of science, what affects one thing affects something else around the other part of the globe and everything else. The same thing with the planetary system, so universe and everything else. So there's a unification constantly at work everywhere throughout the whole universe. So my job is to help to awaken people to that, to take a few steps up in one's brainwave activity, the notches, and hopefully to spin things around for the positive and start making people take a few steps back to kind of take a look at things from a whole new perspective, okay? What I call start loosening letting go and loosening the negatives, whatever the negatives are, and then, welcoming in the positive, but the positive has to be a brightly illuminated, infinite scientific force, okay? Call that force whatever you want. Call that force an infinite scientific force. Call it illumination. Call it inspiration. Call it enlightenment. Call it whatever you want. Call it God, okay? But the thing is that it's the same force, meaning the same infinite force, brightly illuminated force, which awakens people and brings people up to a whole new level of awakening, okay? Brightly awakening, Our consciousness should be a brightly illumined, daytime, wide awake, joyful, exuberant consciousness without the need of having to use substances or whatever it is to get there. We should just be able to get there on our own without having to use anything, without having to drink or smoke a doob or whatever it is that sometimes people do just to try to get there, okay? So, pretty much this whole thing is to maybe to try to help people just to turn on the switch yourself, okay? Inwardly, anytime you want to be able to turn on a switch, okay? Without the help of anything exteriorly to start up-leveling that consciousness to get to those higher levels, okay? To what I call a infinite cosmic integrative function. An infinite cosmic integrative function to start uniting all the various forces for oneself, okay? And that's pretty much it, okay? And through the observer effect, okay? And that's pretty much it. So in the future talks soon, if I talk about anything about religion, politics, whatever it is, I'm going to try to put into this particular format so everybody could start having discussions about it, no matter what side of religion, politics, or whatever, without being disagreeable, hopefully, okay? So that's where I'm coming from, because we got to start turning around this planet, and somebody has to start doing it, and I'm going to attempt to do it anyhow. Okay, thank you for watching this.